Yeah, these vlogs keep us together for 20 minutes at a time. It's not the best that the world's ever seen, but I am thankful you follow this stream on Kirblog. Welcome back, everybody, to Pokecember. This is going up only a few days before Christmas, but I'm recording this way ahead of time just before I leave to go visit my family back in New York. This is going to be a cool one. This is actually a question that was submitted, but it's one that it covers a topic that I actually thought about like a really, really long time ago and just never got to until just recently with doing this month long of Pokemon related Kirblogs. So this one comes from Ruben Williams on Twitter. Is there more to being a Pokemon master than collecting all the Pokemon on all the primary video games? #comprehension. So this is interesting because this is actually spawned from something I remembered a really long time ago. I believe I mentioned in the first of the Pokecember Kirblogs that I had made was that I used to be like in my middle school I was kind of like a curator for more or less a pretend Pokemon campaign with everybody in my class in elementary school for the year of 4th grade for me, back when Pokemon first kind of hit the scene and exploded all over the U.S. basically. There was this one kid. I believe he was the one, because I had mentioned I had given out everybody a different starter, and of course there were 3 who had Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, and then everybody else got like Caterpie or Pikachu or Seal or Dratini or Vulpix or something like that, I don't remember, but this kid named Sean, who I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, he was the best Pokemon trainer, or Pokemon player, I should say, it's not like it was real, but of everybody in the school. He was like the best at playing the game, and he was even the best at playing the pretend game even, and I believe he had the Charmander as his starter and had a badass Charizard, quite fittingly. This kid Sean, I remember he was the first person who kind of planted this idea in me, and it was back when the show was still in its first season, and already people were criticizing like, man, Ash is so stupid. Why does he not go around trying to catch every single Pokemon? Like I remember there was one example. It was one of the first episodes. It was the Mountain Moon episode, I believe, where they go to they go inside and they see like weakened Zubats and Sandshrew and Paris and things like that, and all of them were just like, man, Brock was smart enough to catch that Zubat. Why isn't Ash smart enough to like capture all these other Pokemon so he can complete the Pokedex and everything and catch them all, because that's what the game is all about and everything. And that was already going around even all the way back then when the first season was like it was actually airing on TV in the late 90s. But this kid Sean put this idea out. I was like, I don't really care about catching all 151 Pokemon. And especially because at the time, Gold and Silver was going to be coming out soon, and we knew that we were going to be getting at least 100 more new Pokemon. And he was like, yeah, like, I don't really care that much about, like, capturing every single type of Pokemon. I would much rather, collect 6 that I would want to have for my team. And, and have the strongest team that I could possibly raise through those ones that I pay the most attention to. And I was like, that's kind of interesting. I never really thought of it that way. And that might have actually been, I think I was talking about this on the previous one about the spin-off games. That might have been what led to me raising my own like specific team of 6 powerful Pokemon for in my red version to use specifically in Pokemon Stadium. And I believe that team was Charizard, Vaporeon, Dugtrio, Zapdos, Nidoking, and I want to say maybe like Alakazam, I think. Can't remember, it's been a long time. But yeah, I first heard that, and he was the closest equivalent that we had at the time to like a Pokemon master, quote unquote. Although, of course, by the time 5th grade rolled around, there were, I think I told this story too, there were a lot of kids that were completing their Pokedexes and getting all 151, on their like on their Pokedex and everything. And but something else I kind of noticed, because each generation came out and more and more were added, and of course we're up to like over 700 creatures in the entire franchise with this point, with I'm sure another sect of them when whatever the next generation of games comes out will be. I realized that I think it was after Ruby and Sapphire, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe they finally dropped the "Gotta Catch 'Em All" tagline for the Pokemon franchise in general. And part of it, I mean, okay, the technical reason is because I think that Nintendo and Game Freak, etc., were not really expecting kids who say, now we're getting into Pokemon perhaps for the first time. I think Gold and Silver was definitely catering more to kids who had already played the first game and just wanted more. But Ruby and Sapphire, and then everything that followed afterward, I think the idea is that it was treating everything more like, okay, well, there are going to be a new generation of kids where this generation of Pokemon might be their first Pokemon game ever. So we can't, keep doing it the way that we've been doing it. We got to make it fresh and new and let them have their own experience from the ground up. But yeah, when I began to realize that, it was like, okay, I think it's becoming clear to me like what kind of the better values of this whole thing, were. If any of you guys out there listen to the entirety of the Pokemon and Digimon Kirblog that Ben Diskin and I did together, we were talking also about how stuff from the TV show, influenced a lot of the future games and everything. And I think that this bears repeating because it kind of ties in with the point and everything. With the TV show, it was delving a lot more into, the actual bonding between the trainers and their Pokemon. Like even from the very beginning, it was all about, the first episode is Ash and Pikachu coming to a point of understanding and caring about each other. And then by the end of, or not by the end of it, but like just throughout the show, Ash is forming these personal relationships with all of his Pokemon. And especially too, I remember even going back as far as the first season when people would be, yelling and screaming at Ash for giving up a lot of his Pokemon. I think in the more recent series, there's been a lot less of that because now, and this has just been a different, kind of setup more or less. But in the more recent seasons, Ash will collect a lot of Pokemon and rotate them around throughout the season. He'll keep them back at Professor Oak's laboratory and then bring them back, for when he wants to switch them out for a different type that he might need. And then especially at the end of a particular generation, he'll call back a lot of the ones like Charizard and Snorlax and Muck and all that from the previous seasons and use them for his battles against the other trainers and everything, which is awesome. But it's funny, like everybody was so angry about, oh my God, I can't believe he let Butterfree go, or he just gave up Primeape, or he left Haunter behind and all that stuff. And everybody got so uptight about that. But the thing is, I feel like what the show has always captured is, again, the fact that like Ash had a personal relationship with each of the Pokemon that were on his team. Probably in some ways even more so than a lot of his traveling partners did with some of their Pokemon. Because like, Misty and Psyduck, they had kind of a little, developmental arc with them throughout the show. And Brock, I guess, a little bit with Vulpix, especially in that eventually he gave that Vulpix back to the girl that he got it from. And, so there were cases like that, but especially with Ash, Pikachu and him are always like, they're buddies through and through, and their friendship is pretty much infallible as far as I'm concerned. But, with all the new Pokemon that he captures, like I remember, I didn't get to see a whole lot of this, but in Diamond and Pearl, I know that Bill Rogers, who is the voice of a lot of different Pokemon characters, he still does, the creatures and stuff on the series now. He was really excited about Chimchar because, Chimchar had this whole kind of story where like, he was owned by Paul, who was that really dickish trainer from the Diamond and Pearl season. And then Ash picked him up and, that was how he got the, I think he has Turtwig and Chimchar, and then Piplup was owned by Dawn, if I'm remembering correctly. But, that sort of thing I thought was actually really interesting. And like, there was a lot to that, same thing with like, Charmander, where he came from and like, why he was being so unruly, throughout the whole arc with him and everything like, and stuff like that became more and more integrated into how the games worked because, now the most recent one with X and Y where they have the Pokemon Me thing and you can like, pet them and feed them stuff and everything like that's all stuff that I feel was much more established from the show. Because if you think about it too, going back to the very first game, at the very end when you defeat Gary, or you defeat your rival character in the Pokemon League, after you've finished the Elite Four and everything, Professor Oak comes in and he yells at his grandson for like, oh, you never treated your Pokemon with care. They're just tools to you. And, he rewards your player character for caring and loving your Pokemon. It's like, in the very first game, there's really no way to even like discern what the hell that means, And even I think in Gold and Silver onward, they integrated like different features in how you could tell like if your Pokemon actually liked you or not. I think that even before that, Pokemon Yellow was sort of an experiment in it with, how Pikachu was treating you because you could, tell his emotions and everything and be able to look at it that way. But yeah, everything else, it was like, oh, now you can actually determine like your Pokemon is happy or angry at you, for various reasons and different technical things in the game that, allow that to happen. Or even now they have like, oh, they're of this particular nature and this is their, their strong point. And, and of course, like from just the kind of the technical aspect of like, for really competitive Pokemon trainers, they try to breed and raise, particular types of Pokemon that, have a certain strength, or whatever their, the attribute they really want to, get them way up there with. And there's a lot of like, EV training, which I have no comprehension of like really how EV training works. I don't care to really get to know the competitive side of Pokemon battles, honestly. But that said, I do respect them a lot because the fact that it's like Pokemon is like, as far as I'm concerned, the only RPG turn-based game of the modern age that is like a worldwide, like beloved competitive multiplayer game in the first place. It's kind of incredible. But kind of getting back to the main point, in those early days, we were all kind of pondering like the actual like, being a Pokemon master was always like the thing that was kind of, touted around. It's like, okay, well, what does that really mean? I think in the beginning, and I don't even know if this was necessarily the case in the Japanese marketing, because I think that Gotta Catch 'Em All really just might have been, if I'm remembering right, it might have just been like an American marketing thing to get people to more want to buy, the game and trade and do all this kind of social thing with it and all that. Pokemon is a really interesting, unique kind of experience in that, it's a very sociable kind of, game. And of course we have a lot more of that stuff now because of the internet and like online games and MMOs and MOBAs and stuff like that, where there's like much more of a community. Pokemon is a different kind of beast where like, it's so just like instantly relatable by like everybody basically. Like, and of course you can play online, which is even better, bigger and better now. I can't even imagine what that would have been like if I grew up with that back in the day and I was playing with people online all over the world. I felt very fortunate to be able to battle people over the fucking link cable and everything with the original Red and Blue, and, playing on Pokemon Stadium with people and things like that. Like, that was really cool to me to be able to do that stuff. But yeah, I don't know. It's got a really amazing, unique kind of quality to it. But being a Pokemon master, like in the context of like, what does that mean? I think like there was a lot of like kind of misconstrued information about, it's about collecting all 151 Pokemon or all 700 whatever Pokemon. And I'm sure that there are people who actually do that. And that's, incredibly, that's a feat. That's very admirable. And, I think you typically get the little diploma thing from one of the characters that represents like the Game Freak staff in whatever generation of game that is. And, and that's super impressive. But I don't know, like, once I did that in the first game, it was like, oh, cool, I did it. I got the diploma. But I'm like, I don't really feel like doing that again because that's not why Pokemon is fun. I don't think that that's really ever been the main reason as to why Pokemon is fun for anybody. I'm sure there are probably people who like love the collecting aspect about it the most. And that's totally fine. But I think that like on a larger, kind of more relatable scale to everybody around the world, and why Pokemon has been such a huge success is because of bonds and friendships made out of the entire franchise. And I know that sounds really like, haha, like, like super cheesy, like, Saturday morning cartoon moral of the story kind of shit. But it really is true. It's like, in the context of like the creatures themselves, it's like the bonds that you form with your party, like with the Pokemon that you specifically want to catch. Like when I play a new Pokemon game, I catch the ones that like, oh, that would be really cool. I want that kind of like fighting type Pokemon. And, of course, like from a technical aspect, it's like, yeah, I want to have like a balanced team of a lot of different types and everything. But it's to me, it's more about like, oh, like I like that Pokemon. I want to have that on my team because that sounds really cool. I like them, or they look cool, or they seem cool to me, or they like, I like their powers or something, or they're just interesting to me, or they're really cute, or whatever, whatever the reason is. And that's a personal connection that I, formed out of that. And then I get attached to those Pokemon especially when you nickname them and you train them yourself and you give them your own kind of, semblance of whatever you want to give them for moves and everything. It's like you form a personal connection out of that. And then, going even further, it's like, you become friends with people, through playing those games. And, even if it's like from a competitive standpoint, but, sometimes like you can make really good friends out of that. I certainly did when I was in school. I lost a lot of them when, the craze was dying down, and then I, went too far with it and became annoying because that led to me getting picked on. But the people that I made and stuck with me, the friends that I made and those who stuck with me all throughout that are, some of them, including like Mike Lucas, for instance, like are still my friends all these years later. And we can still be like, oh yeah, this is not about Pokemon or whatever. And still it's exciting to us, But again, what does it mean to be a Pokemon master is kind of the real point of that, right? I think that being a Pokemon master is, being a really, well, I think in the context of like the real, like the lore of the series, like whether it's the games, the TV show or whatever, I think masters are just really, really incredibly powerful Pokemon trainers. And part of the reason as to why they are is because they have a great understanding of Pokemon as, living creatures. You look at in the TV series when we get to, and even in the recent games where like we get to know the gym leaders and the Elite Four members and the champions, a lot more in depth now. Like we get attached to them as characters these days. They're typically very fierce battlers and competitors, but they're also very peaceful, like down to earth, cool kind of people that have like a great understanding of like the entire world around them. They have great bonds with other characters like from different gyms and different areas and cities all over the region that they're the champion of, etc. I think that kind of like speaks volumes in and of itself too. Like the strongest Pokemon trainers in each of the individual regions tend to be like very well-adjusted individuals who like, have had a lot of great life experiences. They have like a lot of bonds and friendships with different people like all over the region that they rule over. They have a really powerful set of just a particular set of Pokemon that they, have their own personal bonds with and or have a huge amount of trust with. It's funny too because I think something that was pointed out to me in the later seasons of the show when Ash would come across the champions and the champions would be like main characters. They'd often have like the final evolved form of a particular Pokemon that Ash would also happen to have. Like Cynthia from Diamond and Pearl, I believe, had a Garchomp. And Ash captured a Gibble that eventually turned into, I think it eventually evolved into a Gabite. I can't remember exactly. My Gabite probably evolved, the one that Corey caught when he went back to Johto, but we'll see. Anyway, but yeah, that sort of thing where it's like, that's really cool, like to see that kind of parallel, and it's like it's a height that he wants to climb to because it's always about like for Ash it's like having those experiences, making those friends with all these different creatures, and especially now where like I feel like he does learn a lot more where like he can have the balance of training all these different ones and really working hard to like work personally with them to like help them get better and etc. Like they're, and what, I know you could like, it's still easy to make the joke of all the obvious jokes of like, but he doesn't learn as much. And then like, it's still glorified cockfighting and whatever. It's like, I get it. It's like, you can still totally make a lot of those arguments, but I don't know, in terms of like what the real answer to that is I think that is being the closest thing to a Pokemon master in the context of like, both the world of the franchise, again, whatever incarnation it is, whether it's the games, the shows, or the comics, or whatever it is, as well as just playing the games and experiencing the whole franchise in real life. I think that being a Pokemon master is something like that. And, I don't know what the competitive, top Pokemon players in the world are like. I've never met anybody. The only person that I really know who's ever like really deeply into competitive Pokemon on a personal level was Kira Buckland, Rena-chan. There was a time where she was like super, super big into playing Pokemon competitively. I think when Heart Gold and Soul Silver came out, that was the first one that she played, and she was just like absolutely fixated on it. And now she's gotten to be really attached to Gyarados as her favorite Pokemon. Chicks dig Gyarados. I've noticed this. It's an interesting kind of pattern where like Gyarados has a lot of female fans. It's kind of funny to me, especially considering Misty was always like so adamant about like, ugh, Gyarados, god damn it, and then she ended up getting one, kind of funnily enough. But yeah, I think that's kind of the end of that. I've been thank you, by the way, for submitting this question. I've been wanting to do a subject like this for a really long time, and just like I've been sitting on it for maybe like 2 whole years by this point. I can't remember when I first came up with it, but yeah, thank you, Ruben, for submitting this and giving me an excuse to finally talk about it. And in addition to the fact that Pokemon Month was going to be a thing anyway, but either way, that's going to do it. So I guess in the comments below, tell me what is your personification or your definition of what a Pokemon master is? What does that literally mean to you in any kind of, does it mean different things depending on what aspect of the franchise it is? Whether, in the games, the show, or the movie, and the bump and the log in the middle of the seat, and the tree, the green grass grows all around, the green grass grows all around. Good. Tell me below your thoughts. I'm curious. Leave a comment. And if you have suggestions for future Kirblog topics, Pokemon or otherwise, leave a comment about that too. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, anything you like to submit your question. And that'll do it. So only got a couple left. The next one is going to be the full story of how I worked on Pokemon as a voice actor playing the character of Corey. So look forward to that. And then a very special surprise one that will be coming after that, after Christmas is over. So I think actually Christmas it'll be after Christmas in the next couple ones. So any of you out there who celebrate Christmas, merry it. I celebrate that, so I'll be doing that in a few days. After this video comes out, I'm already in New York by this point. Blah blah blah, whatever. But I hope you're all been having a great holiday season in general and a great month. Thank you all for listening as usual, and I will catch you all later in another type of Pokeball that I haven't mentioned yet. A lure ball, sure, why not? Totodile.